us to begin is just giving a little bit of a little bit about yourself, but then just a little bit about the church, the founding of the church, where you met, and then just what were some of the challenges as you began to think about these campaigns? Um, what were the thoughts that you were working through and the challenges ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. So this goes back to 2002, actually. And so in 2002, I'd been a student pastor for 11 years and just felt God moving me into another arena and area, and interviewed with a few church planning organizations, didn't quite gel, wasn't God's leading. And he was pretty much saying, you're going to stay in the same county, just in the far southern tip. I was in the northern part of the county. Now I'm down in the southern part in Fredericksburg. And we met in a high school for 10 years.
Hmm.
And part of the journey of meeting in a high school was that our county had a 7-year limitation on a tenant, on a leaser. So we knew early on that probably year 2, 3, we needed to start looking for land. And so we did at start year 2 or 3, and we looked for a couple of years, walked dozens of tracks, and nothing's happening. Actually, I had a meeting with the land team and disbanded the team. I said,
Ah.
we're all fired. We're done. We've looked and looked, and we're just going to take a break and see what God does. And about 3 months later, one of the realtors on our team called, and there was a 54-acre piece of property where our campus is now, to fast forward a bit and be the spoiler alert, was coming available. And this was in 2008. You might be aware there was a market crash, and there were supposed to be like 115 houses built on this parcel. And the owner, the developer, was going bankrupt. So there's a long story there about how it went from 4.1 million to where we paid $1 million cash. That's a God story. But I think the biggest thing to know is we realized we could not stay at the high school, nor did we want to.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to create an environment where we could really drill deep in people's lives throughout the week. It's never been about buying land and building buildings. It's been about impacting and transforming lives, and having a place from which to do that has been really significant. And so, anyway, I'd never led any type of capital campaign in the past. I'd been a student pastor. Previous church had one, but I was more on the peripheral. And so it came that time, and I'm like, I know nothing about this. I'm seminary trained, but I can tell you, as a 33-year veteran, there's a lot of things they don't teach you in seminary,
Hmm.
and this would be one of them.
So, Daryl, when you began to think about you're going to have to do a capital campaign, you chose not to do it internally, but to bring a partner on board. What led you to that decision?
Well, I think it comes back to expertise. As I said, being seminary trained, yeah, there's theology, there's languages, there's preaching. But yet, when it comes to like managing budgets and raising capital to resource vision, designing buildings, there's a lot of things that are not in the wheelhouse. At least there wasn't in my MDiv work. And so then it became conversations to like, wow, who could be a partner? Who has some expertise in this arena that could come alongside? And what I gained and learned from that is that you're basically hiring a part-time staffer for a season, and this is what they do. This is God's calling on their life. And I was so pleasantly, shouldn't say surprised, but very pleased that there weren't gimmicks. There wasn't a smoky mirror deal. I think a lot of capital campaign folks are perceived like used car salesmen and insurance salesmen, and I hope I'm not offending any of those type of people on the search team right now, but they're not always esteemed with high respect. It's like, yeah, they're just trying to trick people out of some money to do something for the church. And man, I was so pleased to be trained and coached to where, man, every financial decision that someone makes is a spiritual decision first.
Hmm.
That's how it starts. It's a matter of the heart. And so from for me, not knowing anything and being coached up, and as you said a moment ago, Joel, we did back to back to back to back campaigns, 2008, 2011, 2014, 2017. And we would have done 2020 if not for a little thing called COVID.
So, Daryl, if you would just give a snapshot of what those four campaigns, what the goal was or the purpose of those four campaigns. I think the first one was to, well, I'll let you talk. You
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about.
yeah. So the first one was to acquire land. And now that and man, God's timing. And again, this just points back to how spiritual the journey is. We were a young church, maybe a couple of hundred people. And property in Northern Virginia is not cheap. And as I said, it started at 4.1 million. We paid 1 million cash, but we didn't have $100,000 in the bank. And so we're sitting down with the bank and they're saying, how are you going to pay for this? And I'm going, this may sound strange to you, but as people of faith, we believe God will provide. We think that where God guides, he provides. And as soon as we're starting to have these conversations, we were in the midst of our very first capital campaign. And it just aligned beautifully to where we're having our first meetings and we're going like, we think we have land that will work and that's going to work out. And so we began having those conversations, and then we cast the vision and we prayed. And the beauty of a campaign is there's many hands on deck. So a lot of people were involved way before they hear about it publicly. But when we're able to go public and we began having those conversations that God is providing, and then the question for all of us, was what God, what is it that you want me to do with your stuff? Mm-hmm. It's yours. We're just managers. We're just stewards. And so that first campaign, we were trying to raise 1.5 for the land. Even though it was $1 million, we had some cost involved to start thinking about building. And so our first fruit, our very first offering, we brought in $850,000.
I remember
and
that.
We're going like, God, you're in this. And then 2 families took out second mortgages on their homes to make up the delta. And we paid cash for 54 acres. Mm. So phase one, the first campaign was land. The second campaign was building. And so we built just shy of 22,000 square feet of space on the campus. And the first campaign was for that, to get the building going. The third campaign was obviously to help continue making the payments on the debt from the first phase of the building, and also some rec area for our students. And so we added volleyball court, basketball, picnic area, playground for the kids. We were able then to pave parking that had been gravel. So it wasn't a debt campaign, even though debt was a component. And then we came to our fourth campaign, and that was to add an office wing as well as another, good-sized meeting room that'll seat 150. That's attached to that because our staff since 2012 had been in a trailer in a gravel parking lot. And so we were able then to add our admin wing. And so we were able, with our fourth campaign, to pay cash for a 1.2 million expansion. And then we also had funds left to continue to service the debt on the original building.
So, Daryl, were there any metrics or milestones that that you, as the senior pastor and the leadership, was looking at to kind of measure how you were doing in your capital campaigns and in the journey?
Yeah, I think that's layered, Joel. I think there's obviously the fact that we have a vision, and the vision needs to be resourced. And in fact, I was just making a presentation last Sunday to our elders, thinking about what God has in store for our future. Not just being complacent or saying, yes, we're done, but God, what's next? And I cracked the code on every campaign, what the goal was, what the pledge was, what was received, percentages, as maybe a business person would, because we have elders who want to be debt free, and believe me, I'm for that. But to think that we have about $7.4 million in assets, and in a 12-year period, we owe 1.4.
Hmm.
I think most business people would say, I'll sign up for that.
Yeah.
And this is much larger than just corporate and business. God has been in this. Lives have been changed. And that's what it's about. But I think the one learning is, yes, there is the reality of needing to resource God's vision. I think the second part is, as people are challenged to do something big for God, they realize that their stuff doesn't matter as much as they thought. When you begin hearing stories of people, delaying car purchases, you hear stories of people, we were going to renovate our kitchen, but we can wait 3 years. When they begin to put God first to see kingdom stuff happen, I mean, it just puts a pep in my step. And so, that's just huge. I think a third piece is, when it comes together, there's just a sense of awe in God's goodness, God's favor, his path, his plan. Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to the metrics. There's some that's, you can't put, in an Excel spreadsheet, but there's that 5, man, this is our church. We're in this together. And in our community, we're very transient because we're next to the largest Marine Corps base in the world, and we're a bedroom community for Washington, D.C. And so every summer we have, probably 20-25% of our congregation exit. And then we'll get another batch for 9 months, sometimes 3 years, just depends on, their orders. But just realizing for each one is like you're standing on the shoulders of those who went before you. Now, who are you going to pave the way for in the future to trust and follow Jesus? It's not a plot twist. It's not guilt. It's like, man, God's kingdom is a lot bigger than a church or where you happen to go to church. And so as we have people, all over the world, literally, after they've been here and they then go to their next duty station, they have, man, I made an investment there. Yes, with my serving, but also with my giving, that's changing lives for all eternity. And so there's a piece of that awe and wonder that you can't put to a metric, but that spiritual dimension truly happens.
Daryl, you've talked a little bit about some of the things you've observed and learned, but wonder if there are a couple of bullets around as you look around those 4 campaigns. What did you learn about capital campaigns, stewardship initiatives? We've called them different things. And what do you think the church has come away from those experiences thinking and feeling?
From a church leadership position as a senior pastor, I'm so thankful I heeded the advice of a wise guy who said, during this season, this needs to be a singular focus. I want to be clear, it's a lot of work. But it's so exciting to see God at work. And so just to realize, if you are led to be in that season of having to resource the vision and go through a capital campaign or a resource the vision initiative, that needs to be the only thing on your plate. You can't think about a major outreach initiative or launching a new local mission project or suddenly creating another campus overseas. It's all hands on deck. Yeah. For that season. And that is one lesson that I'm thankful I heeded that advice early on. And so for each of the other 4, and we're thinking about a 5th now, it's like, hey, that season is intense because you're in a lot of meetings with a lot of people, casting vision, answering questions, making the ask, and to realize, yeah, it has to be a singular focus. I think another part that I've enjoyed along the way is that it's spiritual. There's a prayer focus, and without prayer, nothing happens. And so there has to be that idea of prayer and mobilizing a lot of people through prayer. We've had prayer vigils, we've had prayer walks, all kinds of ways to rally around the idea that, folks, this is spiritual. It's not just about money. And if your heart grows for God and for God's kingdom and you don't give a penny, it's a win. But yeah, it's spiritual. And so prayer is a huge, huge part of that. I think also as a leader, how to, with humility and courage and boldness, engage people in conversation about what God might be calling them to do with their stuff. Actually, I'm sorry, with his stuff. A lot of people don't think of it that way. And so when you're in a room with one or two people and you're like, hey, I sense you have the capacity to make a big difference. And I'm just going to ask you to pray about that reality. Because obviously, we're not going to get to where we need to be with everybody chipping in $50 or $100. But spiritually, would you pray about what God might be calling you to do with the things he's entrusted to your care? There's no arm twisting. Just to pray about that for the next week. If you need to ask me questions, ask me questions. But to realize I needed to grow, because that's not something that you're trained, or at least I wasn't trained in seminary, is how do you sit down and have these conversations with people who God has entrusted a lot into their possession, a lot into their hands. I think the final takeaway that I would add from these journeys is speed of the leader, speed of the team. People can sniff out a phony. And my wife and I, by God's grace and provision, have been blessed, and we've been able to be a significant part in funding the vision here. And I've never stood up to tell people what that amount was. But I think after 22 years here, they know I'm in. And I think the speed of the leader, speed of the team is a big part of it. And so if you're a pastor, a staff member, a key leader, I mean, you can't just talk about it. You got to walk it too.
Those are excellent takeaways, Daryl. So let me ask you one final question for anybody that might be watching this, that would say, all right, Daryl, I'm getting ready to do a capital campaign. What advice would you give me on the front end?
I will reiterate one I've said at least 3 times. Most of us were not trained to do this. We haven't had formal education. We haven't read about it in a book. And so for that season, having a trusted partner to walk by your side, to really mentor and coach you up. A key mistake in this, and with an initiative like this, could set the church back for years. And so we get one chance to get it right. And I'd rather get it right than try to recover from the sand trap. And so, man, just having somebody who's been there and done that and has that expertise, and yes, it's not the gimmick and the smoke and mirror. It's genuinely, they love Jesus, they love his church, and they will walk with you, coach you up, and they have best practices. They provide great examples of some written and printed and web materials and Bible studies to use in small groups and devotions from other journeys they've helped, or other resources. Man, it's just like, it's golden to a pastor of a small church who's trying to keep everything moving in the same direction and have this major initiative. So I think having someone come alongside you to help shoulder that load is significant, and it's huge. Yeah, the resources, I can't overstate that enough, of how to get it to the website, how to use social media, how to leverage prayer. And I mean, there's just all of these things that, again, not classically trained to do. And having a trusted partner, I could sleep at night.
Daryl, this has been a great experience just to connect and visit with you again. And I look back on our time together as just one of the highlights of the ministry that God has called me to in serving churches in the area of stewardship, giving, and generosity. And love you like a friend, like a brother, and honored to have been a part of what you're doing and what the church has done there in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I so thank you for your time this afternoon.
The feeling's mutual, my friend, and I look forward to what God has in store for us in the future together.